In 1982, a cheerleader named Sarah Beth Coleman broke Michael Jordan's heart. When the skinny sophomore asked her to homecoming, she said no and let her friend call him nobody in front of the whole school. That nobody became the greatest basketball player ever. But what happened to the girl who rejected him? The truth will shock you. Sarah Beth's real reason for saying no wasn't what anyone thinks. And the secret she's hidden for 40 years changes everything. What if she actually wanted to say yes? And what if her biggest mistake became Michael Jordan's greatest teacher? What if I told you that the most famous basketball player in the world once had his heart broken by a cheerleader who didn't even know his name? And what if I told you that this same cheerleader's life took a turn so unexpected, so heartbreaking, that it would make you question everything you think you know about fame, success, and second chances? You'd probably think I was making it up. After all, everyone knows Michael Jordan's story. The man who flew through the air, who won 6 championships, who became the greatest basketball player who ever lived. We know about his wins, his losses, his comebacks. We think we know everything about his airness. But we don't. I'm Marcus Thompson, and I've been covering basketball for 30 years. I've interviewed superstars and bench warmers, coaches and fans. I thought I'd heard every story the game had to offer. That was before I met Sarah Beth Coleman. Right now, I'm sitting in Rosie's Diner in Wilmington, North Carolina. It's the kind of place where the coffee is strong, the pie is homemade, and the waitresses call you honey, even if they've never seen you before. The smell of bacon and fresh biscuits fills the air. Outside, Spanish moss hangs from old oak trees. Like nature's curtains, across from me sits a woman who looks like she could be anyone's aunt or neighbor. Sarah Beth has gentle brown eyes and silver hair pulled back in a simple ponytail. Her hands show the wear of hard work. Small scars, calluses, nails kept short and practical. She wears a blue dress that's neat but not fancy, and a small gold cross hangs from a thin chain around her neck. You wouldn't look twice at her on the street. You'd never guess that this quiet woman holds one of the most important secrets in sports history. People think they know everything about Michael Jordan, Sarah Beth says, her voice soft with a hint of Southern accent. She stirs sugar into her coffee with slow, careful movements. But there's one story that never made it to the books. One story that changed 2 lives forever. I lean forward, my small recorder sitting between us like a bridge. After 3 decades of interviews, I can usually tell when someone has a real story to tell. The way they hold themselves, the look in their eyes, the careful way they choose their words. Sarah Beth has all the signs. I've been looking for you for 6 months, I tell her honestly. Your name came up in conversations with people who went to Laney High School. They said you knew Michael Jordan before he was famous. But when I tried to find you, it was like you disappeared. Sarah Beth smiles, but there's sadness in it. I didn't disappear. I just learned to be invisible. Sometimes that's the safest way to live. The waitress, a woman named Betty with bright red lipstick and a beehive hairdo, refills our coffee cups. You two doing okay over here? Need anything else? We're fine, thank you, Sarah Beth says politely. Betty moves on to the next table, but I notice how Sarah Beth watches her go, how she seems to study people, like she's always trying to understand their stories. Why now? I ask. Why are you willing to talk after all these years? Sarah Beth takes a sip of her coffee and looks out the window. A school bus rumbles past, filled with children heading home. Some things never change in small southern towns. Because I'm tired of carrying this alone, she says finally. And because there are people out there who need to hear this story. People who think their mistakes define them forever. People who believe it's too late to start over. She turns back to me, and I see something I didn't expect. Strength. This woman has been through things that would break most people, but she's still here. Still fighting. Still hoping. Before I tell you what happened between Michael and me, she continues, you need to understand something. The real story isn't about rejection. It's about what happens when you choose wrong, and how one decision can haunt you for the rest of your life. I feel my pulse quicken. This is why I became a journalist, for moments like this, when someone trusts you with their truth. But it's also about redemption, Sarah Beth adds, her voice growing stronger. It's about learning that your worst day doesn't have to be your last day. That sometimes the people who hurt us teach us the most important lessons of all. The diner seems to fade around us. The clatter of dishes, the hum of conversation, even the traffic outside, all of it becomes background noise. There's just Sarah Beth, her story, and the weight of secrets finally ready to be shared. Are you ready to hear it? She asks. I nod, my finger hovering over the record button. Then let me take you back to 1980, Sarah Beth says, closing her eyes, as if she's traveling through time. Back to Laney High School, where a skinny basketball player named Michael Jordan was about to learn his first lesson about heartbreak. She opens her eyes and looks directly at me, and where I was about to make the biggest mistake of my life. Sarah Beth's voice grows distant as she travels back in time. I can almost see the memories playing behind her eyes like an old movie. It was fall of 1980, she begins. The leaves were just starting to turn, and Laney High School felt like the center of the universe. You know how it is when you're 17. Everything feels so important, so permanent. She pauses, gathering her thoughts. I was Sarah Beth Coleman, then captain of the cheerleading squad, honor roll student, dating the quarterback. I had blonde hair that I spent an hour fixing every morning, and I wore my leather jacket like a crown. I thought I had life figured out. The way she says it, I can tell she's both proud of that girl and sorry for her at the same time. Laney High was small enough that everyone knew everyone, but big enough to have its groups. You had the football players and cheerleaders at the top, then the student council kids, the band members, the smart kids who took all the advanced classes, and then you had everyone else. She takes another sip of coffee, and I notice her hands are steady now. Talking about the past seems to calm her. My boyfriend was Tommy Richardson. Tommy was everything a teenage girl thought she wanted. 6 feet tall, sandy brown hair, muscles from years of football practice. He was going to get a scholarship to play college ball, and we were going to get married right after graduation. I had it all planned out. White dress, church wedding, house with a white picket fence. There's something in her voice when she mentions Tommy that makes me think this story doesn't end well for him. I was popular, but I wasn't mean. At least, I didn't think I was. I said hello to everyone in the hallways. I helped with school fundraisers. I tutored younger kids in math. I thought being nice sometimes was enough. The word sometimes hangs in the air like a warning. That's when Michael Jordan entered my world. Except back then, nobody called him Michael. He was just Mike, this skinny sophomore who got cut from the varsity basketball team. Can you imagine? The greatest basketball player of all time got cut from his high school team. She shakes her head, smiling at the memory. Mike was tall, probably about 6 feet even then, but he was all arms and legs. He had this gap between his front teeth and a nervous laugh that he did when he was embarrassed. His clothes never quite fit right. Hand-me-downs from his older brother, I think. He carried his books in an old canvas bag that was falling apart. I try to picture it, the awkward teenager who would become a global icon. But there was something about him. Sarah Beth continues, her voice growing softer. Even then, you could see it if you looked hard enough. He had these eyes that seemed older than the rest of him. And when he played basketball, even on the junior varsity team, he moved differently than other kids. Like he was dancing to music only he could hear. She pauses, lost in the memory. Mike had noticed me. I knew because my friend Jennifer Walsh told me. She'd seen him watching me during lunch, looking away real quick when I turned around. She thought it was funny, this nobody having a crush on me. The way she says nobody makes me wince. But here's the thing nobody knew, not even Jennifer. I had noticed him too. This is the first hint of the secret she's been carrying, and I leaned forward slightly. There was something about Mike that drew my attention. Maybe it was how hard he worked during JV practice. Maybe it was how he treated the younger kids, always encouraging them, never making fun of anyone. Or maybe it was just something I couldn't name, a feeling that this boy was going places, even if nobody else could see it. She looks directly at me. I used to watch him shoot baskets behind the gym after practice. He'd stay until it was almost dark, making the same shots over and over until he got them right. I'd make excuses to walk past the gym windows just to see him out there, determined and alone. The picture she's painting is heartbreaking. 2 teenagers noticing each other, but trapped by social rules neither of them made. My world was pep rallies and homecoming court and Friday night football games where I cheered for Tommy while wearing his leather jacket. Mike's world was junior varsity games in the smaller gym, where maybe 20 people showed up to watch. She sighs deeply. We lived in the same school, but we might as well have been on different planets. I was dating the king of the school, and he was just Mike Jordan, the kid who got cut from varsity. The irony in her voice is thick enough to cut. I told myself it didn't matter. I had my life planned out with Tommy. I was going to be homecoming queen, then prom queen, then the perfect wife to the perfect husband. Mike Jordan was just a silly crush, something I'd outgrow. She looks out the window again, watching life go by on the quiet street. But crushes have a way of growing stronger when you try to ignore them. And Mike was working up the courage to do something about his feelings. Something that would change both our lives forever. She turns back to me, and I can see the weight of what's coming next in her eyes. It was a Tuesday in October when everything changed. The air was crisp, the leaves were golden, and I was sitting in the cafeteria with my friends, planning my perfect life with my perfect boyfriend. Her voice drops to almost a whisper. That's when Mike Jordan walked up to our table and asked me to the homecoming dance. She closes her eyes, as if the memory still hurts after all these years. And that's when I made the choice that I've regretted every single day since. Sarah Beth's hands tremble slightly as she reaches for her coffee cup. Even after all these years, this memory still has the power to shake her. I can see it like it happened yesterday, she says, her voice barely above a whisper. Mike had been building up courage for days. His friend Larry told me later that Mike had practiced what he was going to say in front of his bedroom mirror. She takes a shaky breath. It was lunchtime on a Tuesday. I was sitting at our usual table by the big windows in the cafeteria. The autumn sun was streaming in, making everything look golden. I was with Jennifer Walsh, Amanda Price, and Kelly Stevens, my cheerleading squad. I can picture the scene. Teenage girls at their special table, untouchable in their social kingdom. We were talking about homecoming dresses. Jennifer was showing us a magazine picture of some fancy dress she wanted her mother to buy. Amanda was complaining about her date. Everything was normal and perfect in my little world. Sarah Beth pauses, gathering strength for what comes next. Then I saw Mike walking toward our table. My heart started beating faster, but I told myself he was probably just walking past to get to the lunch line. But he kept coming, straight toward us. She closes her eyes, living the moment again. He was wearing a blue button-down shirt that was too big for him and jeans that had been washed so many times they were almost white at the knees. His hair was combed neat, like he'd tried extra hard that morning. He was carrying a folded piece of paper in his hand. The detail about the paper breaks my heart. A teenage boy who cared enough to write down what he wanted to say. When he reached our table, everything went quiet. Not just at our table. It felt like the whole cafeteria was watching. Mike cleared his throat and looked right at me. Sarah Beth opens her eyes, and I can see tears forming. "Hi, Sarah Beth," he said. His voice cracked a little, the way teenage boys' voices do when they're nervous. Could I talk to you for a minute?" She wipes at her eyes with a napkin. Jennifer and Amanda started giggling. Not mean giggling, just the way girls do when something unexpected happens. But Kelly elbowed Jennifer to make her stop. I'm holding my breath, even though I know how this story ends. I should have said yes. I should have gotten up and walked with him somewhere private. But I was 17 and scared and stupid. So I said, "You can talk here, Mike." "What's up?" The regret in her voice is devastating. Mike looked around at my friends, then back at me. He was blushing so hard his face was almost red. But he took a deep breath and said it anyway. Sarah Beth's voice drops to barely a whisper. "Sarah Beth, would you like to go to the homecoming dance with me?" The silence stretches between us. I can almost hear the echoes of that long-ago cafeteria. For about 3 seconds, nobody said anything. Mike was looking at me with these hopeful eyes. My friends were staring with their mouths open. And I felt my whole world tilting sideways. She takes another shaky breath. Because the truth was, Marcus, I wanted to say yes. Every part of me wanted to jump up and say yes. But I was too scared, too worried about what people would think, too trapped by the life I thought I was supposed to want. This is the revelation I've been waiting for, and it hits like a punch to the stomach. So instead, I said the words that have haunted me for 40 years. "Oh, Mike, that's really sweet, but I'm already going with Tommy. We've been planning it for months." She's crying now, quiet tears that speak of decades of regret. Mike's face just fell, like someone had turned off a light inside him. He nodded slowly and said, "Okay, I understand. Sorry to bother you, but the story isn't over." That should have been the end of it. A simple no, a little embarrassment, life moving on. But then Jennifer opened her big mouth. Sarah Beth's voice turns angry, not at Jennifer, but at the memory. Jennifer Walsh looked Mike up and down and said, loud enough for half the cafeteria to hear, "Seriously? You actually thought Sarah Beth would go with you? She's the cheerleading captain, and you're nobody." The cruelty of teenage social hierarchies laid bare in one sentence. The cafeteria did go quiet then. Really quiet. You could hear the lunch ladies in the kitchen dropping spoons. Mike just stood there, his face getting redder and redder. Not from embarrassment now, but from humiliation. Sarah Beth looks directly at me, and I said nothing. I sat there and let my friend call him nobody. I sat there and watched him die a little inside. I sat there like a coward. The self-hatred in her voice is almost unbearable. Mike looked at me one more time. Not angry, just sad, disappointed, like he'd expected better from me. Then he turned around and walked away. The paper with his speech was still crumpled in his hand. She wipes her eyes again. The cafeteria slowly went back to normal. Jennifer laughed and said something about the nerve of some people. Amanda shook her head like she couldn't believe what had happened. Kelly looked uncomfortable but didn't say anything. Sarah Beth stares out the window. I sat there for the rest of lunch feeling sick to my stomach. I kept telling myself I'd done the right thing. I was Tommy's girlfriend. I was going to homecoming with Tommy. That was the plan. She turns back to me. But that night, I lay in bed staring at the ceiling, thinking about the look on Mike's face, thinking about how I'd felt when he asked me, thinking about what might have happened if I'd been brave enough to say yes. Her voice grows stronger. That was the night I learned that the choices we make in moments of fear can follow us forever. That was the night I realized I wasn't the person I thought I was. She looks directly at me. But Marcus, that wasn't even the worst part. The worst part came the next day when I almost found the courage to make it right. Sarah Beth stares at her hands for a long moment. When she speaks again, her voice is filled with a different kind of pain, the pain of a missed chance. I didn't sleep that Tuesday night. I kept thinking about Mike's face, about what Jennifer had said, about my own silence. By morning, I'd made a decision. I was going to find Mike and apologize. She looks up at me, and I can see the ghost of that 17-year-old girl in her eyes. I got to school early on Wednesday. I knew Mike had study hall first period in the library, so I waited by his locker. When he came walking down the hall, my heart started pounding again. The regret in her voice is thick. He saw me standing there and slowed down. For a second, I thought he might turn around and walk the other way, but he kept coming. When he reached his locker, he just stood there, not looking at me. I can picture the awkward silence between them. I said, "Mike, I need to talk to you." He finally looked at me, and his eyes were different, colder, more careful, like he'd put up walls overnight. Sarah Beth takes a sip of coffee, buying herself time. He said, "What about?" Not mean, just tired, like he didn't have the energy for more embarrassment. She closes her eyes, living the moment again. I took a deep breath and said, "I'm sorry about yesterday, about what Jennifer said. That was wrong." The conversation she's describing feels like a lifeline that was almost thrown. Mike opened his locker and started getting his books. He said, "It's okay, Sarah Beth. She was just telling the truth. I'm nobody, and you're somebody. I get it." The acceptance in his voice must have been devastating. That's when I should have told him the real truth. That I'd wanted to say yes. That I thought about him more than I should. That Jennifer was wrong. He wasn't nobody to me. Sarah Beth's voice breaks slightly. Instead, I said, "You're not nobody, Mike. You're a good person." It was true, but it wasn't enough. It wasn't what needed to be said. She opens her eyes, and they're bright with unshed tears. Mike looked at me for a long moment. Then he said, something I'll never forget. "Thanks, Sarah Beth. That means more than you know." The kindness in his response makes the story even more tragic. He closed his locker and started to walk away. That was my moment, Marcus. That was when I should have grabbed his arm and said, "Wait, I changed my mind. I want to go to homecoming with you." The silence stretches between us. But I didn't. I stood there and watched him walk away, and I told myself it was for the best. I had a boyfriend. I had a reputation. I had a plan. Sarah Beth's voice turns bitter. So Mike and I went back to living in our separate worlds. But something had changed. We'd notice each other in the hallways now. Sometimes our eyes would meet, and there'd be this moment of possibility. But then one of us would look away. She describes the rest of their high school years with the pain of someone watching a movie where she knows the ending. Mike grew 6 inches that year. He made varsity as a junior and became the star of the team. College scouts started coming to games. The same kids who'd laughed at him in the cafeteria were suddenly trying to be his friend. The transformation she's describing is remarkable. I watched it all happen from my place in the popular crowd. Tommy and I were still together, still making our perfect plans. But I found myself looking for Mike in the hallways, checking the sports page for his scores, feeling proud when he did well. There's a wistfulness in her voice. There was one more chance during Mike's senior year. After a big game where he scored 30 points, I was walking to my car and saw him by himself near the gym. Tommy was at a party I didn't want to go to, and for a moment, I thought about walking over to Mike. Another missed opportunity. I actually took a few steps toward him. He looked up and saw me coming. He smiled, not his nervous smile, but a real one. Confident now. Sarah Beth stops, lost in the memory. But then Tommy's friends drove up and honked their horn. They were going to pick me up for the party after. Oh, I turned toward their car, and when I looked back, Mike was gone. The symbolism is perfect and heartbreaking. That was the last real chance we had. A few months later, Mike graduated and went to the University of North Carolina. Tommy and I got married right after graduation, just like we'd planned. Her voice grows flat, like she's reciting facts. I was 19 when I had my first baby, 21 when I had my second. Tommy's football scholarship fell through after a knee injury, and he came back to Wilmington to work at his dad's auto shop. The contrast between the two paths is stark. While Mike was becoming Michael Jordan, winning championships at UNC, I was changing diapers and trying to make ends meet. While he was being drafted by the Chicago Bulls, I was working 3 jobs to pay rent. She looks directly at me. But you know what the hardest part was? Watching him on TV and knowing I could have been part of that story. Not the fame or the money. I didn't care about that. But I could have been part of his journey. I could have been someone who believed in him from the beginning. Sarah Beth's voice grows stronger. Instead, I became a cautionary tale. The girl who chose safety over possibility. The girl who let fear win. She pauses, then adds quietly. But that's not the end of the story, Marcus. Because life has a way of giving us second chances, even when we don't deserve them. And sometimes, the person you hurt becomes the person who saves you. She looks out the window where the afternoon light is starting to fade. The next part of my story gets harder before it gets better, but it's important you hear it all because it explains how a cheerleader who broke Michael Jordan's heart ended up being helped by him 30 years later. Her voice drops to a whisper, and how the biggest mistake of my life taught me the most important lesson I ever learned. Sarah Beth's voice changes as she moves into the next part of her story. The wistfulness is gone, replaced by something harder and more painful. The 1990s were Michael Jordan's golden years, she begins. 6 championships, worldwide fame, everything he dreamed of and more. I watched every game I could, even though it hurt sometimes. She fidgets with her napkin, tearing small pieces from the edge. While Michael was flying through the air, my life was falling apart in slow motion. Tommy's drinking started getting worse after his knee injury ended his football dreams. What began as weekend beers became daily drinking became something much darker. The shift in her tone tells me we're entering difficult territory. At first, I made excuses for him. He was disappointed about his career. He was stressed about work. He was just having a hard time adjusting to regular life after being a star athlete. Her voice grows quieter. But excuses only work for so long. By 1992, when Emma was 5 and Jake was 3, Tommy was coming home drunk most nights. He'd slam doors, yell at the kids for making noise, blame me for everything that went wrong in his life. I can see her hands trembling slightly as she talks. The first time he hit me, I was so shocked I didn't even know what to do. It was over something stupid. I'd forgotten to buy his favorite beer at the grocery store. He slapped me across the face and then immediately started crying, saying he was sorry, that it would never happen again. Sarah Beth looks directly at me. That's how it starts, Marcus. Not with a fist, but with an apology. With promises that it was just one time, one mistake, one moment of anger that won't be repeated. The pattern she's describing is heartbreakingly familiar. But it did happen again, and again, always followed by tears and promises and flowers the next day. I started wearing makeup to cover bruises, making up stories about walking into doors or falling downstairs. She takes a shaky breath. My children watched it all. Emma, who was so bright and brave, started trying to protect me. She'd get between Tommy and me when he was angry. Jake, my gentle little boy, became quiet and scared, jumping at loud noises. The impact on her children clearly breaks her heart. The most. I was working 3 jobs by then, cleaning houses in the morning, waitressing at lunch, stocking shelves at the grocery store at night. Tommy's drinking made him unreliable at work, so more and more of the financial burden fell on me. I can't imagine the exhaustion she must have felt. My hands, which used to be soft from cheerleading and manicures, became rough and calloused. I had scars from cleaning chemicals and cuts from broken glass. I barely recognized myself in the mirror. She holds up her hands, still marked by years of hard work. But even in my darkest moments, I tried to hold on to who I really was. I volunteered at Emma and Jake's school when I could. I slipped extra food to hungry customers at the diner. I stayed late to help elderly clients who couldn't afford full cleaning services. This glimpse of her essential goodness is like a light in the darkness. There were nights when I'd sit in my kitchen after everyone was asleep, reading newspaper clippings about Michael Jordan that I'd been secretly saving. Not because I was obsessed with him, but because he was proof that dreams could come true. The connection she maintained to hope is touching. I remember one night in 1996, after Tommy had been particularly cruel, I was sitting there with a black eye, reading about Michael's 4th championship. I started crying, not from the physical pain, but from the weight of my choices. She wipes at her eyes with the back of her hand. I thought about that girl I used to be, the one who had everything ahead of her. I thought about Mike Jordan, asking me to homecoming with such hope in his eyes. I thought about all the moments I'd chosen fear over courage, safety over possibility. The regret in her voice is overwhelming. That's when I started writing him a letter. I don't know what I thought I was doing. Maybe I just needed to tell someone the truth about what my life had become. She pauses, lost in the memory. I wrote about how sorry I was for the way I'd treated him, how I'd watched his career with pride and admiration, how seeing his success reminded me that people could rise above their circumstances if they were brave enough to try. The letter sounds like a lifeline thrown across time. I told him about my children, about how Emma had his determination and Jake had his kindness. I told him about my work helping other people, how I was trying to make something good come from my pain. Sarah Beth's voice grows stronger, but I never sent it. Tommy found the letter before I could mail it. He was furious, screaming about how I thought I was too good for our life, how I was living in fantasies about some basketball player who wouldn't even remember my name. The cruelty of that moment is devastating. He tore up the letter and threw the pieces in my face. Then he hurt me worse than he ever had before. That was the night I realized I had to choose between staying alive and staying married. Her voice drops to a whisper, but I still wasn't brave enough to leave. Not yet. It would take 2 more years and one final, terrible night before I found the courage to save myself and my children. She looks at me with eyes that have seen too much. You want to know what Michael Jordan taught me, even though he didn't know it? He taught me that the only way to win is to keep playing, even when you're losing. Even when everyone says you don't belong on the court. Sarah Beth straightens her shoulders. I may have been losing for most of the 1990s, but I wasn't ready to give up the game. Not yet. Sarah Beth's hands grip her coffee cup tighter as she prepares to tell me about the night that changed everything. In the diner around us, life continues. Normally, the sound of conversations, the clink of silverware, the hiss of the coffee machine. But at our table, time feels suspended. It was June 14th, 1998, she begins, her voice steady but strained. I remember the exact date because it was the night Michael Jordan won his 6th championship with the Bulls. I was watching the game at work during my break at the grocery store. She pauses, and I can see her gathering strength. I had been saving money for months, hiding it in a coffee can behind the washing machine. Emma was 17 then, about to be a senior in high school. She'd been accepted to 3 colleges with partial scholarships, but we needed money for the rest. The hope in her voice is painful to hear, knowing what's coming. I'd saved almost $3,000. It had taken me 2 years of putting away every spare penny, skipping meals, working extra shifts, but it was going to be enough for Emma's first year. Sarah Beth's voice grows hollow. That night, I got home from work around midnight. The house was dark except for the TV in the living room. Tommy was passed out on the couch with empty beer bottles around him. Nothing unusual. She takes a shaky breath. But when I went to the laundry room to add my tips from that night to the coffee can, it was gone. The can was there, but it was empty. $3,000, just gone. The devastation. In her voice is raw. I stood there staring at that empty can for I don't know how long. All those extra hours, all that sacrifice, all of Emma's dreams, just gone. I felt something break inside me that had never broken before. Her hands are trembling now. I went back to the living room where Tommy was snoring on the couch. I shook him awake and asked him where the money was. He opened his eyes and looked at me like I was stupid. Sarah Beth's voice grows harder. "What money?" he said, but I could see it in his face. He knew exactly what money. So I asked him again, and that's when he got angry. The temperature at our table seems to drop. He stood up, swaying a little, and said, "You mean the money you were hiding from me? In my own house." Like I was the one doing something wrong. The victim blaming is exactly what I'd expect from an abuser. I told him that money was for Emma's college, that it was our daughter's future. And you know what he said? Sarah Beth looks directly at me. He said, "She doesn't need college. She can get married like her mother did." Like my life was something to aspire to. The cruelty of that statement takes my breath away. That's when I learned he'd lost it all gambling. $3,000 gone in one night at some card game. He wasn't even sorry. He was angry at me for hiding money from him. Her voice begins to rise, and she catches herself, looking around the diner. We started fighting, really fighting. I was screaming about Emma's future, about how hard I'd worked, about how he had no right. He was yelling about respect and how I thought I was better than him. The fight she's describing sounds terrifying. Then Emma came downstairs. She'd heard us shouting and came to see what was wrong. When she saw me crying and Tommy drunk and angry, she immediately stepped between us. The image of a teenage girl protecting her mother is heartbreaking. Emma looked at Tommy and said, "Don't you dare touch her." This 17-year-old girl, standing up to a grown man who outweighed her by 100 pounds. Pride and pain mix in Sarah Beth's voice. That's when Tommy completely lost control. He pushed Emma out of the way and grabbed me by the shoulders. He was shaking me, calling me names I won't repeat, blaming me for everything wrong in his life. I can see her reliving the terror of that moment. Emma tried to get between us again, and Tommy shoved her hard. She fell and hit her head on the coffee table. When I saw blood on my daughter's forehead, something inside me snapped. Sarah Beth's voice becomes fierce. I started hitting Tommy with everything I had, screaming at him to get away from my children. Jake came running downstairs, saw the blood, saw me fighting his father, and he did the bravest thing any of us had ever done. The pride in her voice is unmistakable. My 10-year-old son picked up the phone and called 911. While Tommy and I were still fighting, while Emma was bleeding, Jake was talking to the police dispatcher, giving our address, asking for help. The courage of that little boy brings tears to my eyes. When the police arrived, they found me with bruises on my arms and face, Emma with a cut on her forehead, and Tommy drunk and belligerent. The house was a mess, furniture knocked over, pictures broken. She pauses, collecting herself. The officers asked if I wanted to press charges. I'd been asked that question before, and I'd always said no. But this time was different. This time, he'd hurt Emma. This time, my children had seen too much. I hold my breath, hoping she finally found her courage. But I still said no. Even after everything, I was still too scared, too trained to protect him, too convinced that keeping the family together was more important than keeping us safe. The disappointment in her own voice is crushing. After the police left, Tommy passed out again. Emma and I sat in the kitchen, holding ice to our bruises. She looked at me with these eyes that were way too old for 17 and said, "Mom, we can't live like this anymore." The wisdom of that teenager cuts through everything. I looked at my beautiful, brilliant daughter, the girl who was supposed to go to college, who was supposed to have a better life than mine, and I saw my own fear reflected in her eyes. Sarah Beth's voice grows stronger. That's when I realized the most important lesson of my life. Sometimes loving someone means being brave enough to break your own heart. She looks directly at me. I may not have had the courage to save myself, but I had the courage to save them. That night, I decided we were leaving. I didn't know where we'd go or how we'd survive, but I knew we couldn't stay. Her voice drops to a whisper. It took me 3 more days to work up the nerve, but on June 17th, 1998, I packed everything we could carry and walked out that door with my children. The relief in her voice is palpable. We had nowhere to go and almost no money, but for the first time in years, I felt like I could breathe. Sarah Beth's voice lightens as she talks about leaving, but I can hear the fear that must have followed that moment of freedom. Starting over at 35 with 2 children and $300 is harder than anything I'd ever imagined, she says, stirring her coffee slowly. But it was also the first honest thing I'd done in years. She looks out the window where the afternoon sun is starting to slant lower. The women's shelter was a 2-story house on Maple Street that had been converted to help families like ours. It could hold 12 women and their children. When we arrived that first night, I was carrying 2 garbage bags with our clothes and a small box with Emma's school papers. The image she paints is both heartbreaking and hopeful. The woman who met us at the door was named Maria Santos. She was about 50, with kind eyes and calloused hands like mine. She took one look at the 3 of us and said, "You're safe now. Everything else we can figure out." I can hear the gratitude in Sarah Beth's voice even now. Maria showed us to a small room with bunk beds and a tiny dresser. Emma and I would share the bottom bunk, and Jake got the top. It wasn't much, but it was ours, and Tommy couldn't get to us there. The simple safety of that room must have felt like luxury. The first few weeks were the hardest. Emma cried herself to sleep every night, not because she missed Tommy, but because she thought her college dreams were over. Jake kept asking when we were going home, not understanding that we couldn't go back. The children's struggles add another layer of pain to the story. I felt like I was drowning in paperwork and decisions. Government assistance forms, legal aid appointments, job applications. I'd never done any of this alone before. Sarah Beth's voice grows stronger as she continues. But something amazing started happening. Away from Tommy's constant criticism and anger, I began to remember who I was. The real me, not the scared woman I'd become. This transformation is what I've been waiting to hear about. I got a job at Sunrise Diner on Market Street, working the morning shift. The pay wasn't much, but the owner, Mrs. Chun, was patient while I learned to manage my schedule around the shelter's rules. The kindness of strangers becomes a recurring theme. Emma found work at Henderson's bookstore after school. Instead of complaining about not going to college right away, she threw herself into learning everything she could. She taught herself bookkeeping and helped Mr. Henderson with his accounts. The resilience of her daughter shines through. Jake blossomed at his new school. Away from the tension and fear at home, his gentle nature came back. He made friends easily and started bringing home A's on his report cards. Each small victory must have felt monumental. The other women at the shelter became like sisters to me. There was Linda, who'd left with her baby after her husband broke her arm. There was Carmen, whose boyfriend had threatened to kill her if she ever left. There was Denise, who'd been told by her family that divorce was a sin, even when her husband was beating her. The community of survivors created their own support system. We helped each other with everything. Watching kids, sharing clothes, practicing job interviews. We learned that we weren't alone, that we weren't crazy, that what happened to us wasn't our fault. The healing power of shared experience comes through clearly. Maria became more than a shelter director to me. She became a mentor and friend. She saw something in me that I couldn't see in myself. Sarah Beth's voice fills with warmth when she talks about Maria. One day, about 3 months after we'd arrived, Maria sat me down in her office. She said, "Sarah Beth, you have a gift for helping people. Have you ever thought about going back to school?" This seems like the moment everything started to change. I laughed and told her I was a high school dropout with 2 kids and no money. But Maria didn't laugh. She pulled out some papers and said, "These are GED study guides. And this is information about financial aid for single mothers." The possibility of education must have seemed impossible. I stared at those papers like they were written in a foreign language. "I can't," I told her. "I'm working full-time and raising 2 children. When would I study?" The practical obstacles seemed overwhelming. Maria leaned forward and said something I'll never forget. "You're stronger than you know. You've survived things that would break most people. Now you need to learn to thrive." Those words clearly became a turning point. That night, I was sitting in the shelter's common room while other women watched TV. I opened one of those GED books and started reading. It was harder than I expected, but also easier than I'd feared. The first step toward education represents so much more than academics. Emma found me there around 11 o'clock, bent over math problems. Instead of telling me to get some sleep, she sat down next to me. The support of her daughter adds emotional weight to the moment. "Mom," she said, "I've been thinking. I want to wait another year before college. I want to work and help you get through school first." The sacrifice Emma was willing to make shows the strength of their bond. I started to protest, but Emma interrupted me. "You've sacrificed everything for us. Let me do this for you. We're a team now." The role reversal is both touching and empowering. Jake, who'd been pretending to sleep in his bunk, spoke up from across the room. "I can help too, Mom. I'm good at math now." Even her youngest son wanted to contribute to their shared goal. Sitting there in that common room, with my children supporting my dreams instead of me supporting theirs, I felt something I hadn't felt in 20 years. The emotion in her voice builds to this revelation. I felt proud of myself. Not proud of what I'd accomplished, but proud of who I was becoming. Proud of the example I was setting for my children. Proud of choosing courage over comfort. This moment of self-recognition is powerful. 6 months later, I took my GED exam. My hands were shaking as I filled in those bubbles, but my mind was clear. When I got the results 2 weeks later and saw that I'd passed, I cried harder than I'd cried since leaving Tommy. The achievement represents so much more than a test score. Emma and Jake were waiting for me in the lobby when I came out of the testing center. I held up that certificate and said, "We did it. We actually did it." The celebration they shared must have been incredible. That night, Maria took us out for dinner at a real restaurant. As we sat there eating and laughing, I realized something important. Sarah Beth looks directly at me. I wasn't just surviving anymore. I was learning to live again. And for the first time since I was 17 years old, I was excited about what came next. Sarah Beth's eyes brighten as she moves into the next part of her story. The woman sitting across from me now seems different from the one who started. Telling this tale, stronger, more confident, like she's remembering her own power. 5 years passed like a blur, she says, and I can hear the pride in her voice. By 2003, I was 40 years old and had my GED, 2 years of community college under my belt, and a job I actually loved. The transformation she's describing is remarkable. I was working as a caseworker at the Community Resource Center, helping other women who were trying to escape situations like mine. Emma was in college on a full scholarship, studying to be a lawyer. Jake was 15 and thriving in high school. The success of her children clearly means everything to her. Life wasn't easy, but it was good, really good. I had my own small apartment, a reliable car, and for the first time in my adult life, I was making decisions based on what I wanted, not what I was afraid of. This independence she's describing sounds hard-won and precious. The work at the resource center was perfect for me. I could look at a woman sitting across from my desk, scared, broken, convinced she had no options, and I could see myself 5 years earlier. Her ability to connect with other survivors makes perfect sense. I remember one particular case that spring. A young woman named Ashley came to see me. She was 22, had a baby, and was trapped with a boyfriend who controlled every aspect of her life. Sarah Beth's voice grows gentle as she describes this client. Ashley sat in my office crying, saying the same things I used to say. "I can't leave him. Where would I go? What would I do? Who would hire someone like me?" The echoes of her own past fears are clear. I leaned forward and told her something Maria had once told me. "You're stronger than you think you are." I know because I was sitting where you are now, and I learned something important. Courage isn't the absence of fear. It's doing what's right even when you're terrified. The wisdom she's gained from her experience shines through. By that summer, Ashley had left her abuser, gotten her own apartment, and was taking night classes to become a nurse. Seeing her transformation reminded me why I loved this work so much. Each success story must have felt like a personal victory. But the biggest change in my life came from an unexpected phone call in September 2003. I was at home, helping Jake with his algebra homework when the phone rang. Sarah Beth pauses, and I can see she's building towards something important. The woman on the other end said, "Ms. Richardson, this is Dr. Patricia Williams from the University of North Carolina. I've been following your work at the Community Resource Center, and I'd like to talk to you about an opportunity." The surprise in her voice is still there after all these years. I almost hung up, thinking it was some kind of mistake. But Dr. Williams continued, "We have a graduate fellowship program for exceptional students who want to work in social services. Your supervisor, Janet Morrison, recommended you." The recognition of her potential by others must have been overwhelming. I sat there holding the phone, not knowing what to say. Me? At the University of North Carolina? It seemed impossible. The self-doubt she's describing is so relatable. Dr. Williams explained that the fellowship would pay for me to complete my bachelor's degree and then earn a master's in social work. Full tuition, plus a living stipend. All I had to do was maintain good grades and commit to working in social services for 5 years after graduation. The opportunity sounds almost too good to be true. When I finally found my voice, I said, "Dr. Williams, I don't think you understand. I'm 40 years old. I have 2 children. I don't have the background for something like this." Her insecurity about her qualifications is heartbreaking. She laughed gently and said, "Ms. Richardson, from what I've heard, you have something that can't be taught in textbooks. Real experience and the ability to connect with people who need help. That's exactly what we're looking for." The validation of her lived experience as valuable knowledge is powerful. After I hung up, I sat staring at the phone for 10 minutes. Jake asked if I was okay, and I realized I was crying. The emotional impact of unexpected opportunity comes through clearly. "Mom," Jake said, "what's wrong?" And I told him, "Nothing's wrong, sweetheart. Something might finally be right." The hope in that moment must have been overwhelming. But accepting the fellowship meant leaving Wilmington, leaving the life I'd built, leaving the work I loved. It meant starting over again, this time in Chapel Hill, surrounded by people who were decades younger and far more educated than me. The fear of change, even positive change, is understandable. I called Emma that night to tell her about the opportunity. She was quiet for a long moment, then said, "Mom, do you remember what you always tell your clients about taking chances on themselves?" Her daughter's wisdom mirrors her own advice to others. I knew she was right, but I was still scared. What if I wasn't smart enough? What if I failed? What if I was just a 40-year-old woman trying to live in a young person's world? The fears she's listing are so human and relatable. Jake settled it for me the next morning at breakfast. He looked up from his cereal and said, "Mom, you always tell your clients to be brave. Maybe it's time you took your own advice." The inside of her teenage son cuts through all her fears. 2 weeks later, I drove to Chapel Hill for an interview with Dr. Williams and the fellowship committee. Walking across that campus, with its brick buildings and old oak trees, I felt like I was stepping into someone else's life. The university setting must have been intimidating, but also inspiring. The interview went better than I'd hoped. They asked about my work with domestic violence survivors, about my own experiences, about my goals for the future. For the first time in my life, I felt like my story was an asset instead of something to hide. The shift from shame to strength is profound. Dr. Williams walked me to my car after the interview. "Sarah Beth," she said, "I hope you'll say yes. We need people like you, people who've lived through challenges and come out stronger. You have something to teach us." The respect she's being shown must have been transformative. As I drove back to Wilmington, I thought about 17-year-old Sarah Beth, sitting in that cafeteria, too scared to be honest about her feelings. I thought about how different my life might have been if I'd had more courage then. The connection to her teenage self brings the story full circle. But I also realized that maybe everything had happened exactly as it was supposed to. Maybe I needed to go through all that pain and struggle to become someone who could help others. Maybe my mistakes had prepared me for this moment. The acceptance of her journey as necessary preparation is wise and healing. 3 days later, I called Dr. Williams and accepted the fellowship. Jake hooped so loud the neighbors probably heard him. Emma cried happy tears over the phone. The family celebration of this achievement is touching. That night, I stood in front of the bathroom mirror, looking at my 40-year-old face with its lines and scars, and I said something I hadn't said since I was 17. The moment she's building toward feels significant. I said, "I'm proud of you, Sarah Beth. You did something brave." The self-affirmation after decades of self-doubt is powerful. And for the first time in 23 years, I meant it. Sarah Beth takes a deep breath, and I can tell we're approaching the heart of her story. The reunion she's been building toward for 8 chapters is finally here. I'd been at UNC for 6 months when I learned that Michael Jordan was coming to campus, she says, her voice growing softer. It was March 2004, and the university was hosting a special ceremony to honor his charitable foundation's work with at-risk youth. The timing feels significant, almost destined. The social work department had been invited because of the partnership between his foundation and our domestic violence programs. Dr. Williams encouraged all the graduate fellows to attend. Sarah Beth fidgets with her napkin, clearly nervous. Even in the retelling, I spent 3 days debating whether to go. Part of me desperately wanted to see him, to witness firsthand what that awkward teenager had become. But another part of me was terrified. The internal conflict she's describing is completely understandable. I was afraid of the memories it would bring back, afraid of how I'd feel seeing him, afraid that it would remind me of all the ways my life had gone wrong while his had gone so right. Her fears seemed reasonable given their shared history. Emma called me the night before the ceremony. She was in her senior year of college then, studying for law school entrance exams. When I told her about my doubts, she said something that changed my mind. I leaned forward, curious about her daughter's wisdom. "Mom," Emma said, "you've spent your whole life helping other people face their fears and move forward. Maybe it's time you followed your own advice. You need to see this chapter of your story through to the end." The advice mirrors what Sarah Beth had been telling her clients for years. So I went. I chose a seat in the back row of the auditorium, where I could observe without being seen. I wore my best dress, a simple navy blue one I'd bought for job interviews, and I arrived early. The care she took in preparing shows how important this moment was. When Michael walked onto that stage, I was struck by how much he'd changed, and how much he'd stayed the same. He was confident now, comfortable in his own skin, but there was still something familiar in his eyes. The recognition of the boy she once knew within the man he'd become is touching. He spoke for about 30 minutes about his foundation, about the importance of giving back to communities that had supported him. He talked about second chances and the power of believing in people who others had written off. The themes of his speech must have resonated deeply with her own journey. But it was something specific he said that made my heart stop. He looked out at the audience and said, "I learned early in life that people can surprise you. Sometimes, the person you think has nothing to offer is actually the one who can teach you the most." The connection to their shared past seems almost intentional. He continued, "And sometimes the people who hurt us end up being the ones who teach us our most important lessons about forgiveness and growth." Those words must have felt like they were meant for her. After the ceremony, there was a reception in the campus center. I started to leave, telling myself I'd seen enough, that I should be satisfied with observing from a distance. The impulse to retreat is natural after carrying guilt for so long. But as I walked toward the exit, I thought about all the times I'd encouraged my clients to face their past, to make amends when possible, to find closure where they could. Her own professional advice becomes the catalyst for action. I turned around and walked back into that reception. Michael was surrounded by university officials and admirers, shaking hands and posing for pictures. I waited patiently at the edge of the crowd. The courage it took to stay and wait must have been enormous. When there was finally a brief lull in the crowd, I took a deep breath and stepped forward. My heart was pounding so hard I could hear it in my ears. The physical manifestation of her nervousness is so relatable. "Mr. Jordan," I said quietly, "I'm Sarah Beth Coleman. I went to Laney High School with you." The simplicity of her introduction belies the weight of the moment. He turned toward me, and for a second, I saw confusion in his eyes. Then, slowly, recognition dawned. His public smile faded into something more genuine, more personal. The moment of recognition must have been electric. "Sarah Beth Coleman," he said, and his voice was gentler than I'd expected. "I remember you." Those 4 words carried the weight of decades. We stepped away from the crowd, finding a quiet corner near some tall windows overlooking the campus. Quad. For a moment, we just looked at each other, 2 middle-aged people who had once been awkward teenagers. The setting for their conversation feels appropriately private and meaningful. "I owe you an apology," I said, the words tumbling out. "Before I lost my courage. For how I treated you in high school. For not standing up for you when my friend was cruel. I was young and scared, but that's no excuse." Her apology is direct, and takes full responsibility. Michael was quiet for a long moment, studying my face. Then he said, "We were kids, Sarah Beth. We all made mistakes back then." His gracious response shows the man he's become. "Maybe," I said, "but some mistakes stay with you longer than others. I want you to know that I watched your career over the years, and I was always rooting for you. I'm proud of what you've accomplished." Her honesty about following his career adds depth to their connection. He smiled then, and for a moment, I saw a glimpse of that 17-year-old boy I'd once known. "Thank you for saying that. It means more than you know." The gratitude in his response must have been healing. We talked for maybe 10 more minutes about our families, our work, our lives since high school. I told him about my children and my work with domestic violence survivors. He told me about his foundation and his commitment to helping young people. The conversation they're having sounds natural and comfortable. As our conversation wound down, Michael said something that took my breath away. "You know, Sarah Beth, what you're doing sounds just as important as anything I've accomplished. Maybe more important." The validation from someone she'd once hurt must have been overwhelming. I started to protest, but he continued, "Helping people rebuild their lives, giving them hope when they have none. That takes a special kind of courage. The kind of courage I'm not sure I would have." His respect for her work shows how he values different types of heroism. Before we parted, he handed me his business card and said, "If your program ever needs support, please don't hesitate to call. I'd be honored to help." The offer of assistance must have been unexpected and touching. As I walked back to my car that evening, I felt something I hadn't experienced in years. It wasn't closure exactly, but something deeper. It was forgiveness, not just his forgiveness of me, but my forgiveness of myself. The emotional resolution she's describing sounds profound. I realized that the scared 17-year-old girl who had made that terrible choice in the cafeteria had grown into someone who could make amends, who could face her past with honesty and grace. The connection between her teenage self and her adult self shows real growth. That night, I called Emma and Jake to tell them about the encounter. Emma cried happy tears over the phone. Jake, who was 18 then and wise beyond his years, said, "Mom, now you can stop carrying that weight around." Her children's reactions show how her guilt had affected the whole family. He was right. For 24 years, I'd carried the shame of that moment in the cafeteria. But standing in that reception hall, talking to Michael as equals, I finally understood something important. The lesson she learned seems to be the culmination of her journey. Our worst moments don't define us. How we grow from them does. And sometimes, the people we think we've hurt end up being the ones who teach us the most about grace and forgiveness. This wisdom represents years of hard-won understanding. As I drove home that night, I felt lighter than I had in decades. I'd faced my past, made my peace with it, and discovered that the boy I'd once hurt had grown into a man who understood the power of second chances. The sense of relief and completion is palpable. But Marcus, that's still not the end of our story. Because what I didn't know that night was that Michael Jordan was about to become one of the most important people in my life, in a way I never could have imagined. We're back in the present now, in this small diner in Wilmington where our conversation began. Sarah Beth looks at me with eyes that hold the weight of a story finally being told in full. I can sense we're approaching the revelation that will change everything I thought I knew about this tale. "That's a beautiful story, Sarah Beth," I say carefully, but I have to ask, why did you agree to talk to me? After all these years of privacy, why tell this story now? Sarah Beth is quiet for a long moment. Her fingers trace the rim of her coffee cup, which has long since grown cold. The afternoon light streaming through the diner windows has shifted, casting different shadows across our table. "Because there's something else, Marcus," she says finally, her voice barely above a whisper. "Something I've never told anyone. Something that changes everything about that day in the cafeteria 30 years ago." I lean forward, my heart rate picking up. After 9 chapters, I thought I knew this story, but the look in her eyes tells me I was wrong. "The truth is," she continues, taking a shaky breath, "I didn't reject Michael Jordan because I was already going to homecoming with Tommy Richardson." The words hang in the air between us like a bomb waiting to explode. I rejected him because I was scared. Terrified, actually. Scared of what? I ask, though I think I'm beginning to understand. Sarah Beth looks directly at me, and her voice grows stronger. Scared because I liked him back. Really, truly liked him. I had been watching. Him too, Marcus. For months. I'd been hoping he would notice me, hoping he would find the courage to talk to me. The revelation hits me like a physical blow. Everything I thought I understood about their story has just been turned upside down. You mean? I mean that when Mike Jordan walked up to our table that Tuesday in October 1982, my heart didn't sink. It soared. Every part of me wanted to jump up and say yes to his invitation. She wipes at her eyes, which have filled with tears. But I was 17 years old, and I was more afraid of what my friends would think than I was brave enough to follow my heart. The tragedy of that moment becomes even more devastating with this new information. So when he asked me to homecoming, I panicked. I gave him the answer I thought I was supposed to give, not the answer I wanted to give. She pauses, gathering strength for what comes next. But Marcus, that's not even the worst part. The worst part is what I did the next day. I'm holding my breath now, sensing we're approaching the core of her decades-long regret. The day after I rejected Mike, I couldn't stop thinking about him, about the look on his face, about what I'd done, about what I really wanted. Her voice grows stronger, as if telling this secret is somehow liberating. So I decided to fix it. I was going to find him and tell him the truth. I was going to say that I'd made a mistake, that I would love to go to homecoming with him. The image of 17-year-old Sarah Beth finding that kind of courage is both inspiring and heartbreaking. I found out where he lived from the school directory. It was a small house on Pine Street, about 2 miles from my neighborhood. I walked there after school on Wednesday. She closes her eyes, living the memory again. I stood outside his house for 20 minutes, working up the courage to knock on the door. I could see lights on inside. I could hear a TV playing. I knew he was home. The suspense of that moment is almost unbearable. I walked up to the front door 3 different times. Each time, I'd raise my hand to knock, and each time, I'd lose my nerve and walk back to the street. The physical manifestation of her internal struggle paints a vivid picture. Finally, on the 4th try, I actually knocked. Softly at first, then louder when no one answered. My heart is pounding as she describes this pivotal moment. Mike's mother came to the door. Mrs. Jordan was a kind woman with gentle eyes. She smiled and asked if she could help me. The kindness of his mother makes what comes next even more painful. I told her I was a friend of Mike's from school and asked if he was home. She said he was in his room doing homework, and she asked if I'd like to come in. Sarah Beth's voice breaks slightly. That was my moment, Marcus. That was when I should have walked into that house and told Mike the truth. That was when I should have chosen courage over fear. But you didn't, I say softly. No, I didn't. I stood there on his front porch, looking at his mother's kind face, and I said, actually, never mind. It wasn't important. Thank you anyway. The weight of that decision clearly still haunts her. I turned around and walked away. Mrs. Jordan called after me, asking if she should tell Mike I'd stopped by, but I just kept walking. The missed opportunity seems almost too tragic to bear. I've thought about that moment every single day for 40 years, Marcus. Not because I think my life would have been perfect if I'd knocked on that door, but because I learned something crucial about courage that day, or rather, about the cost of not having it. She looks at me with eyes that have seen decades of regret. You asked me earlier if I regret my choices. I regret the way I treated Mike in the cafeteria. I regret not standing up to Jennifer when she was cruel. I regret not having the courage to be honest about my feelings. Her voice grows thoughtful. But I don't regret my life, Marcus. My children are everything to me. My work helping other women has given me purpose I never could have imagined. I've learned that there are many different ways to have a meaningful life. She reaches into her purse and pulls out an envelope that looks like it's been handled many times. There's one more thing I need to tell you. The reason I'm sharing this story now. The reason I finally agreed to talk. She slides the envelope across the table to me. My name is written on it in handwriting I don't recognize. What is this? It's a letter from Michael Jordan. He asked me to give it to you when you came to interview me. My hands are trembling as I pick up the envelope. He knew you were coming. Sarah Beth nods. He's been a silent supporter of my work for 10 years, Marcus. Ever since our conversation at UNC, he's been funding programs, making donations, helping me expand the services we offer to domestic violence survivors. The revelation that Michael Jordan has been secretly supporting her work adds another layer to their story. He never asks for recognition, never wants his name attached to anything. He just quietly helps, year after year. She gestures toward the letter. Last month, he called me and said he thought it was time for our story to be told, not for publicity or attention, but because he believes it might help people who are carrying their own regrets, their own shame about past mistakes. I stare at the envelope, afraid to open it. He said he wanted people to understand that redemption is possible, that our worst moments don't have to define us forever. Sarah Beth's voice grows gentle. He specifically asked for you to write the story, Marcus. He said he'd been following your work for years and trusted you to tell it honestly and with compassion. The weight of that trust is overwhelming. Read the letter, she says softly. It explains everything better than I ever could. As I open the envelope with shaking hands, Sarah Beth adds one final thought. What I want people to understand, Marcus, is that this story isn't really about rejection at all. It's about two scared teenagers who were too afraid to be honest with each other, and how that moment of fear taught both of us lessons that shaped the rest of our lives. I unfold the letter, and Michael Jordan's words are waiting to change everything. I thought I knew about this story. My hands tremble as I unfold the letter. The paper is cream-colored and expensive, with Michael Jordan's personal letterhead at the top. Sarah Beth watches me silently, her eyes reflecting years of carried secrets finally being released that I begin to read aloud. To whoever tells Sarah Beth's story, I want you to know that the woman sitting across from you is one of the most important people in my life. Though we've spent less than an hour together in the past 30 years, everyone knows the story of my basketball career, the championships, the records, the fame. But they don't know the story of how I learned to handle rejection, how I learned to turn pain into fuel, how I learned that sometimes the people who hurt us are also the ones who teach us the most valuable lessons. I pause, looking at Sarah Beth. Tears are streaming down her face, but she nods for me to continue. Sarah Beth Coleman didn't just reject me at lunch that day in 1982. She taught me that I had to earn respect, that I couldn't expect people to see my potential just because I believed in it. She taught me that sometimes the answer is no, and that's not the end of the world. It's just the beginning of working harder. But more than that, she taught me about forgiveness and the power of second chances. When she approached me at UNC in 2004, she didn't have to apologize. I had moved past that teenage embarrassment years ago, but she did it anyway because she had grown into someone who takes responsibility for her actions, even actions from decades earlier. Sarah Beth covers her face with her hands, overwhelmed by his words. I need to tell you something that Sarah Beth doesn't know. 2 days after she rejected me in the cafeteria, I was shooting baskets behind my house, angry and hurt and feeling sorry for myself. My mother came outside and found me there, and I told her what had happened. Son, she said, sometimes God puts people in our path not to give us what we want, but to teach us what we need to learn. That girl may have said no to a dance, but she said yes to showing you who you really are. I look up at Sarah Beth, whose eyes have widened in surprise. Clearly, this is news to her. My mother was right. That rejection lit a fire in me that burned for years. Every time I faced doubt, every time someone said I wasn't good enough, I remembered how it felt to be called nobody in front of half the school. I used that pain to push myself harder, to prove that Sarah Beth and her friends were wrong about me. But here's what took me years to understand. They weren't wrong about who I was then. I was nobody special, just a skinny kid with big dreams and no way to back them up. Sarah Beth's rejection wasn't cruel, it was honest. And sometimes honesty is the greatest gift someone can give you, even when it hurts. Sarah Beth is sobbing now, and I have to pause to compose myself. I've watched Sarah Beth's work with domestic violence survivors over the past 10 years, and I've seen her transform her own pain into purpose. She helps hundreds of women find the courage to leave dangerous situations, to start over, to believe in themselves again. She takes broken people and shows them how to rebuild their lives with strength and dignity. The teenage girl who was too scared to follow her heart became a woman who teaches others to choose courage over comfort. The cheerleader who chose popularity over authenticity became someone who helps others find their authentic voice. The young woman who made one wrong choice became someone who dedicates her life to helping others make better choices. The transformation he's describing is breathtaking in its scope. I've been privileged to support her work financially, but she's the one doing the real work. She's the one showing up every day, listening to stories that would break most people's hearts, and somehow finding the strength to keep believing in human goodness. Sarah Beth Coleman is my hero. Not because she rejected me. That was just a moment in time that taught us both important lessons. She's my hero because of who she became. After that moment, because of how she chose to use her pain, because of the way she's lived her life in service to others. I have to stop reading because my voice is breaking. Sarah Beth reaches across the table and touches my hand. The story isn't about a cheerleader who rejected Michael Jordan. I continue, reading through my tears. It's about two teenagers who were too scared to be honest with each other, and how that moment of fear taught them lessons that shaped their entire lives. It's about a woman who found the courage to leave an abusive marriage and rebuild her life from nothing. It's about someone who turned her darkest experiences into a light for others who are lost in similar darkness. When people read this story, I hope they don't focus on the celebrity angle or the teenage drama. I hope they focus on the woman who found the strength to start over at 35, who went back to school at 40, who chose to dedicate her life to helping others heal. That's the real story. That's the story worth telling. The letter is signed simply, with deep respect and admiration, Michael Jordan. I fold the letter carefully and look at Sarah Beth, who is wiping her eyes with a napkin. He wrote this for you, I say quietly. No, she says, her voice thick with emotion. He wrote it for every woman who thinks it's too late to change her life. For every person who believes their mistakes define them forever. For everyone who needs to know that redemption is possible. She takes a deep breath and looks directly at me. He wrote it to remind people that our worst moments don't have to be our final moments. That sometimes the path we don't take teaches us exactly where we need to go. As I sit in this small diner, holding a letter from one of the most famous athletes in the world, I realize I'm not just reporting a story about the past. I'm sharing a message of hope for anyone who has ever made a choice they regret. Anyone who has ever wondered if it's too late to start over. Marcus, Sarah Beth says softly, are you ready to hear the end of the story? The part about where I am now. I nod, knowing that the real triumph isn't in the reunion or the letter, but in the life Sarah Beth has built from the ashes of her mistakes. The late afternoon sun slants through the diner windows as Sarah Beth concludes her story. Outside, the quiet streets of Wilmington continue their unhurried pace, but inside our booth, time feels suspended by the weight of what I've just heard. So where am I now? Sarah Beth asks, echoing my unspoken question. Her voice carries a strength that wasn't there when we started this conversation hours ago. I'm 58 years old, and for the first time in my life, I can honestly say I'm exactly where I'm supposed to be. She gestures toward the window, where Spanish moss waves gently in the breeze. I live in a small house in Chapel Hill, about 10 minutes from the university. It's nothing fancy, 3 bedrooms, a tiny garden, a front porch where I drink my coffee every morning. But it's mine, and it's filled with love. The simple contentment in her voice is beautiful. Emma is 31 now and one of the best family law attorneys in North Carolina. She specializes in domestic violence cases, helping women navigate divorces from abusive husbands. She says I taught her that sometimes the most important battles are fought in quiet courtrooms, not on television. The pride in her voice when she talks about her daughter is unmistakable. Jake is 29 and teaches middle school. He works with at-risk kids in low-income neighborhoods, the kind of children who remind me of Mike Jordan at that age, full of potential but surrounded by people who can't see it yet. Both of her children chose careers that help others, clearly influenced by their mother's example. Emma has 2 children now, my grandchildren. Sophie is 6 and has her grandmother's determination. Marcus, yes, she named him after you even, though she hasn't met you yet, is 4 and has the gentlest heart I've ever seen. The thought that her daughter named a child after me, someone she knew only through her mother's trust, is deeply moving. I run a nonprofit organization called Second Chances. We help women transition from abusive relationships to independence. We provide emergency housing, job training, childcare, legal assistance, and counseling. In the past 10 years, we've helped over 500 women start new lives. The scope of her impact is staggering. Our success rate is remarkable. 87% of the women who complete our program remain independent and abuse-free 5 years later. We have partnerships with colleges, job training centers, and employers who understand that these women aren't broken, they're just starting over. The statistics she's citing represent hundreds of transformed lives. Michael's foundation has been our largest supporter, though we don't advertise that connection. He believes, like I do, that the work should speak for itself. Every year, his donation allows us to help 50 more families. The ongoing partnership between them has clearly blossomed into something meaningful. People sometimes ask me if I'm bitter about my life. They look at Michael's success and wealth, and they assume I must have regrets about not being part of that world. This question must come up often in her work. But I'm not bitter, Marcus. I'm grateful. My difficult experiences gave me the understanding I needed to help others. I wouldn't have been able to connect with scared, broken women if I hadn't been one myself. The wisdom she's gained from her pain is profound. Every woman who walks into my office sees someone who understands her fear, her shame, her belief that she has no options. They see someone who survived and thrived, who rebuilt her life from nothing and found purpose in helping others do the same. Her lived experience has become her greatest professional qualification. 5 years ago, I met someone special. His name is David Mitchell, and he's a fellow social worker I met at a conference. He's kind, patient, and he loves my children like they were his own. The happiness in her voice when she mentions David is lovely to hear. David knows my whole story, about Michael, about Tommy, about all of it. He says what matters to him isn't where I've been, but who I am now. He tells me every day that my past doesn't define me, my choices do. Finding love again after everything she's been through seems like its own miracle. We're getting married next spring. Emma is planning the wedding, and Jake is going to walk me down the aisle. It won't be the fairy tale wedding I dreamed about at 17, but it will be real and honest and full of people who love us. The contrast between her teenage dreams and her adult reality is striking but beautiful. This morning, before coming to meet you, I was preparing for my next client. Her name is Jessica, and she's 22 with a baby. She came to us last week with nothing but a diaper bag and bruises she tried to hide with makeup. The cycle of helping continues. As I read Jessica's file, I thought about the journey that brought me to this moment. Every rejection, every mistake, every moment of fear and pain, it all led me here, to this work, to this life. The acceptance of her path as necessary preparation is profound. If someone had told 17-year-old Sarah Beth that she would spend her life helping abused women, she wouldn't have understood. That girl thought success meant being popular, marrying the quarterback, living in a big house with a white picket fence. The evolution of her definition of success is remarkable, but 58-year-old Sarah Beth knows better. Success isn't about having a perfect life. It's about taking an imperfect life and making something beautiful from it. It's about using your pain to ease someone else's suffering. Her philosophy has been hard-won through decades of struggle and growth. You asked me earlier if I would change that day in the cafeteria if I could. I've thought about that question for hours while telling you this story. This is the final test of whether she's truly made peace with her past. I would change the way I treated Mike. I would stand up to Jennifer when she was cruel. I would be kinder and braver. But I wouldn't change the outcome, because that path led me here. Her answer shows genuine acceptance rather than regret. Every rejection is a redirection, Marcus. Every closed door opens a window. Every ending is also a beginning. The philosophy she's sharing could help anyone facing disappointment or failure. If you could go back and tell that scared 17-year-old girl one thing, what would it be? I ask. Sarah Beth considers this carefully, then smiles. I would tell her that the person she thinks she needs to be isn't nearly as important as the person she's going to become. I would tell her that her biggest mistakes will teach her her most important lessons. And I would tell her that 30 years from now, she'll be sitting in a diner, sharing her story with a journalist, hoping that someone, somewhere, will read it and find the courage to start over. She looks directly at me. The cheerleader who rejected Michael Jordan became something more important than famous, Marcus. She became necessary. She became the person who catches other people when they fall, who shows them that their worst day doesn't have to be their last day. As I close my notebook, I realize I've witnessed something remarkable, not just the telling of a story, but the completion of a life's journey from fear to courage, from pain to purpose, from regret to redemption. And maybe that's the most important lesson of all, Sarah Beth says softly. Sometimes the path we don't take teaches us exactly where we need to go. Outside the diner, life in Wilmington continues its gentle rhythm. But inside, a story has been told that will change how I think about second chances, about redemption, about the power of turning our deepest pain into our greatest purpose. Sarah Beth Coleman, the cheerleader who rejected Michael Jordan, has become exactly who she was meant to be. Sarah Beth's story reminds us that our worst moments don't define us. How we grow from them does. Sometimes the path we don't take teaches us exactly where we need to go. That we'd love to know where you're listening from. Drop a comment below and tell us your city or country. It's amazing to see how stories like Sarah Beth's connect people from all around the world. If this story touched your heart, please hit that like button. Your support helps us share more stories of hope, second chances, and the power of turning pain into purpose. Don't forget to subscribe and ring that notification bell so you never miss these inspiring stories. Together, we can spread kindness, one story at a time. And speaking of inspiring stories, click on the video appearing on your screen right now for another incredible tale that will remind you why every ending is really just a new beginning. Thank you for listening, and remember, it's never too late to start over.